You do not want to miss today's video. That's the first thing I've got to say. You will love today's video. If you don't, you're not in amateur theatre. Let me preempt what's going on. Monday, which was supposed to be Freedom Day, the 21st, it had been announced that that's when all restrictions were supposed to be lifted. As I say, it was being tagged Freedom Day. It had been announced that it was the earliest possible day, and it might be put back if there was any problems down the line. But for a long time, everyone was saying, it looks like there's no problems, so we're going to be hopefully producing it on the 21st, and there shouldn't be any delay to it. There's no reason why there should be a delay, etc, etc, etc. Until this apparently the government, I mean, it doesn't matter what you think of their handling of the pandemic, or perhaps it doesn't matter what you think of it, but whatever happens, on the 14th, which was the week before, Monday before then, Boris Johnson announced a 4-week delay to Freedom Day, which put everyone into chaos. The professional, a lot of organisations and companies had pinned a lot of hope, and they'd organised their calendars around it happening on the 21st of June, which was 2 days ago now. And so the 4-week delay has caused all sorts of chaos. And immediately there was lots and lots of negative comments from the professional theatre industry, and statements from the likes of SALT, Society of London Theatre, UK Theatre, that's run by SALT, Trafalgar Entertainment. Andrew Lloyd Webber had some big things to say, because of course his new musical Cinderella, plus his resurgence of Joseph at the Palladium this summer, were both going to be having their big openings in that 4-week delay period. So he's in talks at the moment. Sonia Friedman, the producer, we said a few things from. Lots of people have made statements. HQ Theatres, have I mentioned them? White Light, What's on Stage, it goes on and on and on. Just a cursory glance has brought those ones up. That's fine. Now, when it comes to the amateur theatre industry, this is the whole point of what we've been doing. There has been very little said. The amateur theatre industry, non-professional, grassroots, whatever you want to call it, has stayed very tight-lipped. And so what we did, we invited lots of the membership organisations, umbrella bodies from amateur theatre to speak to us, to tell us what was going on, what's happening, what their thoughts are. So that's what we've done. Now, NODA refused to do an interview, and that's their prerogative. That's absolutely fine. They were a little bit blunt about it, but that's absolutely fine. Amdram.co.uk, one of the big websites that's followed by a lot of amateur theatre enthusiasts, they politely declined to do an interview, and Jane over there had some very good reasons that she gave why she couldn't do an interview. A very sick dog was one of the big reasons, and that's absolutely fine. So in the end we spoke to NDFA, which is the National Drama Festivals Association, Stuart Myson, the chair, and Roderick Innis-Chater, who's on the National Council and is chair of the subcommittee for the 2021 National All Winners Finals Festival. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? And organising that and putting that together. We also spoke to the Little Theatre Guild, Joe Matthews, the chair, Eddie Redfern, the National Liaison Officer, and Kevin Spence, the PR officer at the Little Theatre Guild, spoke to us yesterday. We also spoke to NODA's ex-chief executive, Tony Gibbs. Now, just to clarify, Tony Gibbs does not work for NODA anymore. He's given a completely independent view, but obviously with experience of having worked in a bigger organisation like that. So Tony is still a theatre enthusiast and a theatre producer, so we thought it would be quite advantageous to speak to him about getting his views on a few things. So that's what we've done, and we did all that in the last couple of days, and we've brought you that today. And so it's a bit of a lengthy video today. It might take you 2 or 3 sittings to get through, but hopefully you can get through it, and you do not want to miss whatever is being said. So we'll let the videos do the talking. We'll hand over now, and stay safe, stay well. We will be back. Here comes a video. Bye for now.
For our members in the National Drama Festivals Association, it has meant that festivals have had to be cancelled. The festival I'm president of, and no longer run, but I'm president of, is Woking Drama Festival, which is probably the biggest single one-act festival in the country. We had to cancel. We run our festival in a theatre that is managed by ATG, Ambassadors Theatre Group, so we can see firsthand the impact that it's had on a lot of our friends who work professionally in the theatre. This has caused complete devastation to perhaps one of the UK's hidden industries. The drama festival season will run from really the start of September up until the end of June. So you have that 9-month period, and then we run our British All Winners Festival sort of about a month after the end of the festival season. We have not been able to run our normal selection process for teams to compete in the All Winners. We've managed to pull together a very, very strong week-long celebration of festival drama. This delay over 4 weeks, it's had a direct impact on us, on what we want to do with the All Winners. We had a musical theatre workshop, I call it Les Mis in a Day, by Dave Willits, the actor who's performed in both Phantom and had the lead in Les Mis in the West End. The other part that we were doing, we were going to have the Royal Shakespeare Company come in, run 3 workshops. We were understanding the bard, directing the bard, and stage combat. The RSC, like any good professional organization, has now a COVID risk assessment policy. In normal times, we would have been okay. But now, because of this extension, we've had to take the decision that we will cancel those workshops. We had no clear definition that on the 19th, restrictions are going to be lifted. The other area that we are finding is the more this government puts out the scaremongering that COVID is still with us, you can still catch it, be careful, be wary. People are reticent about going into enclosed spaces like theatre. So we've taken the policy that the All Winners Festival will be run with a socially distanced policy. It's not so much being able to accommodate it, it's people, the audiences, Rod's audience, my audience, your audience, having the comfort to come into a space when COVID restrictions have just been lifted. When you're trying to get people to come into a theatre, there will be a hesitation. When you begin to look at the role that drama festivals play in communities up and down the country, drama groups get together, they might enter 1 or 2 festivals, and they've got spaces to rehearse, they've got spaces where their groups can perform regularly. So it's part of their season. We'll do a spring show, we'll enter a drama festival somewhere, we might do something at the local pageant and fete, we'll do a pantomime, and then we'll do some, and that's the social calendar of a lot of groups. When you move up towards the north of the country, where there are drama groups that come together in pubs, they don't have a rehearsal space, they don't have a regular venue in which to perform. Their performance space is going from drama festival to drama festival. So what we're doing is again, this has broken down that societal mix of people, and when pubs were closed and you can't get together and you can't perform and you've got the rule of 6 and you can't rehearse in an indoor space, that's having a very severe effect on what people have in the past called their hobby. You can rest assured that somewhere this is having an impact on a lot of people.
The National Drama Festival Association's British All Winners Finals will be taking place at the Albany Theatre in Coventry between the 18th and the 24th of July. It's originally scheduled dates. As Stu was saying, we've lost, Les Mis Masterclass, and we've lost the RSC workshops and what have you, and part of the concept is gone, but, the core event is taking place. I came on the National Council at Stu's request 3 years ago, specifically to deliver a Midlands event, and Coventry in its City of Culture year was the obvious thing to do. And I had 3 pillars to my game plan. One, that there would be a Lighthorn festival. Lighthorn's in South Warwickshire, the village where I live. And then the second part, in July 2020, there would be an All Winners at the Gaiety Theatre in Douglas on the Isle of Man. This was to provide my manual how to run an All Winners, and I was going to be there all week, in and out of everything going on every day, writing stuff down, working out how to do it. And then my third pillar was that there would be another Lighthorn festival in June of 2021, which would be the final push in terms of publicity, a month out from the All Winners. And I've lost all 3.
We took the view very early on that we can do. We will make this work because, Rod, my wife, and members of our committee have worked ever so hard to bring in groups that we know, as Rod said, are absolute stars in festival theatre. That's different from the way we normally do it. So here we are doing it by invitation, but they are past winners. Yeah, a lot of our members have had to cancel their drama festivals because it just did not make economic sense. By return, there are some that have said, to hell with this, a bit like us, we're not going to be defeated. We will put on a virtual festival. So if you look at the likes of Spelthorne, which is down here in Spelthorne and Runnymede, if you look at Welwyn, they've run their own festivals. If you look at our members up on the Isle of Man, they have run their own festivals because the island was quarantined. So they could do their own thing amongst themselves. But their winners were not allowed out of the island because of, or they couldn't commit to come out of the island because of quarantine restrictions. So, if we were where we were a year ago with restrictions on travel and everything, Rod's 3 years of hard work, or by then 2 years of hard work, would have been pretty sorely thwarted. But we knew we were going to find a way out of it. Didn't help that we got bumped back 4 weeks, but there we are. We're moving it forward.
We've had to make a virtue out of a necessity, which is, as Stu says, festivals up and down the country have had to cancel. Therefore, as Stu says, that we've had to go on invitation. But we have made a virtue of a necessity, and we've invited, for example, the Criterion Theatre in Coventry's premier amateur theatre. And we've invited them to perform. They're not technically a winner, but we've handed them a wild card, and they're performing on the Sunday night. They're opening the show. So that's one of the ways we've had to operate. The Albany Theatre tell us, and other theatres are reporting the same kind of thing, that there is extreme hesitancy, that that people aren't booking in the numbers that would be expected in normal times. Not only that, there's a huge increase in no-shows. People booking tickets 3 months ago saying, oh, it'll all be better then. And it isn't better now. It isn't better then. And they're just, they're not getting a refund. They're just pocketing the loss. and not rocking up. And so, I mean, we won't know almost literally until our opening night, you know, how many walk-ups, how many walk-ins, and what have you.
We are apolitical, so I can't comment on what HMG is saying. As the chairman of the NDFA, I could tell you privately what my thoughts are. Rod knows them. Look, it is a nightmare, but you work with, you know, we've been given a set of rules. That's what we've got to adhere to. You know, little old National Drama Festivals Association is not going to change Oliver Downing or Tony Hancock, sorry, Matt Hancock, or Boris Johnson's view that Hancock's half hour, absolutely, or for those of us old enough to remember him, or Boris Johnson's view on things. But as I said earlier, the fact that these festivals have not been able to take place, the fact that there hasn't been that social interaction, which keeps so many people happy and positive, there will be a knock-on somewhere, you know, in this lost ethereal world of, well, you know, people just had to suck it up and get on with it. I'm terribly sorry if you've been disillusioned. Yeah, thank God we're not talking about sort of major health issues, but mental health is a big issue. Why do you do a hobby? You do a hobby for your state of mind, your peace of mind, for enjoyment, for social engagement, social activity. That's been stripped away. Yeah. Now, you know, the 4-week extension hasn't done that. You know, the 4-week extension has just sort of impacted on mine and Rod's mental well-being. You know, as well. Rob would pull his hair out if he hadn't. I'm slowly pulling my hair out. But you know, it's those little things where we can just put on another 4 weeks because there's some spurious data that says that the Delta variant is raging. You know, it's not my daughter's wedding. You know, it's not a close family member's funeral, but it is just one of these other things that has impacted on certain elements of society's life.
My heart goes out to people running small businesses, shops, what have you, where it really is, you know, a matter of life and death, where it's a living. This is what puts the food on the table, what they do. This is what, you know, buys the kids a new pair of trainers to replace the one that they grew out of. This is hugely important stuff. My heart goes out to them because I know, just from doing this little job that I've been doing to organise from scratch a national drama festival, it is incredibly disheartening because you start to build your edifice because you have to, and then something comes along and demolishes it or part of it, or you have to unbuild it yourself, and then you start to rebuild because you have to. Then something else comes along and it's demolished or part demolished, and still you have to pick yourself up off the floor and get on with it and do it again, because if you don't, then you are left with nothing. You're left with a raised piece of ground with no building at all. And then, you know, and then, you know, what's the point? So it is hugely disheartening. It's hugely dispiriting. You just have to grit your teeth and get on with it. And really, my heart goes out to people who've had to do that, you know, to feed the kids. And a second thing that is taking place, apart from the core festival, the evening programme, is that we have still managed to save the Drama Festivals Conference, which is taking place in the Albany studio on the closing Saturday of the festival proper. That's Saturday, the 24th of July. And this is on diversity and inclusion in UK amateur theatre. And I mean, this is really serious and important stuff. Because, you know, you have only to look around at the very white representation in UK amateur theatre, to know that, you know, there is a problem somewhere, and we have to get more people from different ethnicities involved in all, you know, not just on stage, but in all aspects of theatre making. And this, you know, I mean, it's a high-powered panel. It includes Ian Wainwright from the participation producer from the RSC just down the road in Stratford. So it's, I mean, that fortunately, as we speak, is surviving. It's distanced, but it's surviving. So, you know, it's not all doom and gloom, and hopefully we just get past now this next brief period, and we can hopefully get back to some kind of normality.
Yeah, Rod is absolutely right. One of the things that he and I looked at for the conference theme was very much, we are, you know, most of amateur drama is white, middle class, out of a certain age group.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we, this collective, look to work with more diverse groups and include them into what we're doing? You know, you can talk about colorblind casting. Well, yeah, that's a nice throw in. Yeah, yes, you know, we believe in colorblind casting. Who's done it? Who's actually brought in black actors into a community that is you know what I mean, typically white, middle class? Who has said, I'm going to work with disabled actors with all the complexities that gives us and make it a true piece of performance? We're not thinking in that way. And as people that are engaged with amateur drama and in festivals are moving ever older, who's coming in to replace them? You know, how do we encourage new people and you know, to actually come in and embrace new things? How do we give the confidence to those people to come in and actually run something, perform something, do something? How do we encourage them that when they leave the local village to go to university, and when they come back, they're going to take place in local drama? And these are the people that are going to be looking for more diversity and inclusivity. So we've got to start addressing those facts now. We have a young actor, Alex Mashori, who came through Rod. Rod's known him in his amateur days. He went on from being third spear carrier on the left in the RSC to become a performing, you know, one of their principals. What journey did he go through as a black actor? You know, they're not all cast into Star Wars immediately, or they're not cast into sort of BBC drama. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there. Where I live in Woking, we have a very high Asian community. It is nigh on impossible to get the youngsters into drama, not because they don't want to, but there is still that, yeah, and it's waning, but it's still there, that cultural thing that this is not what you do. The girls can go over and do that. The boys can go over and do that. You're not going to bring them together. So how do we address that? How do we make drama more and more inclusive, irrespective of color, of ability, mobility, education, whatever? That's what our conference is all about. And as Rod said, we've got some very powerful people here that are going to talk about that. You know, the LGBTQI, and I had to look up the other day what QI stands for. The LGBTQI agenda, which is getting more and more prominent. How do you deal with that? You know, how do you address that? Because there are going to be some people in a group that want nothing to do with that, and there's others going to say we're going to have to embrace it, like we're going to have to embrace colourblind casting, like we're going to have to embrace having people in wheelchairs or with learning difficulties or whatever. So that's what we want to do.
We have literally been incredibly busy just coping with whatever is thrown at us. And right now, you know, this week for me is a really good example of that. Yesterday evening, I went to the Cockpit Theatre in Marylebone, to their theatre in the Pound, to hear one of our members' new writing. This evening, when I finish this Zoom, I'm going up to St Albans to one of our members, to the Abbey Theatre, to see Skylight. Tomorrow, I'm doing front of house meet and greet at the Questors Theatre for our student show. And then the next day, we've got a Southern Area LTG Theatres Hub Zoom, which is, our hubs are just kind of 10, 12, 14 theatres in a geographical district. And we keep in regular touch with each other about what's going on and listen to each other's opinions and so on. Now, that's just my actual appointments and places I've got to be. In between all that, I'm making phone calls and sending emails and doing Zoom meetings and all the rest of it. And I think I'm representative of most people in most theatres, that I'm busy just getting on with whatever DCMS throw at us. And I think some of our theatres right now, the Abbey is one of them and the Questors is one of them, is scheduled several weeks ago, about 4 or 6 weeks ago, to do COVID-safe performances with socially distanced performance. Some of them have got fogging machines and, you know, table service, masks on all the way through, all those things. And a lot of them have got the See It Safely logo from SALT as well. They program to do that. So for them, there's actually no disruption at all right now. They're just carrying on because they always plan to do this. But for others, they were going to open this week or on Monday or whatever, and they can't because they haven't prepared for a COVID-safe performance. So they are the worst off theatres right now. They're the ones that are thrown into disarray because they were pinning their hopes on the 19th of July. Whereas others thought, well, let's work out plans that will work for the whole of the summer, and they are just carrying on. As I was sort of saying, they do vary. They have right from the beginning varied enormously over their reactions to all this, because you've got to remember that each theatre consists of a disparate group of personalities that have a sort of a hierarchy in their theatre. But at the end of the day, you know, you can call them committees and trustees and artistic director groups and all the rest of it. They are just a group of personalities. And to move forward on anything, they have to agree. And what you've had all along here is some people, particularly older members, but not necessarily, who said, we just can't do anything. Just batten down the hatches and do nothing. And then you've got the other extreme with some theatres bursting with people going, well, let's do radio plays, let's do new writing, let's do this, let's go outdoors, let's phone the council and see if we can perform in the graveyard. Totally the opposite. They're absolutely bursting with enthusiasm to do things. But they're quite often also the people who are realistic about what's going to be allowed and what's not. And so they're not sort of biting off more than they can chew, if you see what I mean. But I think Eddie has been collecting up, just in this last week, comments from theatres who have been badly affected. Well, he's asked everybody for comments, but he's most interested in theatres that couldn't open on the 19th and the reasons why, what they had planned. And rather sadly, one of the big hit things seems to be our youth theatres, because they were closed all through the first lockdown and the rest of it. Then some of them gingerly opened, then some did some online, and some did a bit of physical stuff. Then they couldn't again, then they could again. And one of them was saying, this is the 4th time the show has been put off. And that's very hard on young people that have really worked hard online and in the rehearsal room to get a show up together. The 4th cancellation, and they've got a long summer ahead of them. Because, of course, the government hasn't made any provision for schools opening in August, which you might have thought they might have done. So they've got this long break ahead of them. And, you know, they're obviously very, very fed up, the young people and the youth tutors and the people who run their theatres. And they're the people I feel for most. They must just think it's such a terrible world where grown-ups keep making all these crap decisions, which they have to suffer from.
From my point of view, and it's very interesting looking at some of the information that Anne Gilmore's got together from member theatres, which is featured in our newsletter. The mood I sense from theatres is that the 4 weeks is just another stepping stone to doing what they want to do, which is to pick up where they left off. That might not be a good idea in every case, because one of the things that we've done as a national committee is to try to get them to use the time that we've had to do a lot of rethinking. You know, it's fairly obvious that a lot of our theatres will have quite rightly thought, right, yippee, we've got a bit of time now to mend the roof, to get the central heating reinstalled and da-da-da-da-da, all that stuff. But we wanted them to think about renewing or rethinking perhaps some of the policies and some of the activities they've taken for granted for such a long time. So whilst everything that Joe has said is true, and a lot of theatres have done stuff in the lockdown and some have and some haven't, I think what we can say is that all of them have been pressed to sort of think about the political situation in which we find ourselves, both sort of party political and, you know, small c Conservative, small l Labour, but to rethink some of the bigger things, because one or two of our theatres get so consumed if with mending the roof and sorting out the central heating that we think our job is to get them to look at big picture stuff. For example, everything that Joe has said about youth theatre is absolutely vital. I know, because I still work with a lot of schools are not even started their after school clubs yet. So it makes the function of the little theatre guild massively important. It always has been as far as youth theatre is concerned, but now it's even more important from September onwards. I noticed that Southport Theatre, for example, is doing a youth production of Fame, which is just a step in the right direction in September. They have a terrific youth theatre. So there's that. We've tried to get our theatres refocused on the crucial things that they don't always think about enough, like diversity and inclusion and so on. And we're heading towards policies and action plans to deal with some of those anomalies that we have in our theatres. We've also done a heck of a lot of work. We've been like coal miners. We've been burrowing away below the surface. Eddie's been sending stuff straight out from DCMS as it's come along. So all our theatres have been updated. We've helped them tremendously with funding of various sorts, government inspired mostly. We've started now to deal a little bit with supporting theatres with renewing licenses, because that's causing a little bit of activity with Concord and various other people, because everybody, including Concord and Nick Hearn, so we're all sort of getting back into it a little bit now. And the main thing is, with that background and all that stuff that we've been doing, another 4 weeks to us is neither here nor there. I mean, most of us, well, I think most of us in the Little Theatre Guild have been around a long time. And so we kind of worked out that we were probably not. I mean, I sat down with a bit of paper and worked out that to get everybody jabbed up to where they are in Israel, for example, to have, you need to do a bit of basic maths. And guess what figure I came up with, or what date? July the 19th, by which we'd have, I'm not all that bright. I mean, anybody in any little theatre could have worked that out. And I think that's what they've done. I think they've just thought, right, well, we're going to get another 4 weeks probably. So here we go. We're still planning for our September seasons, and let's, the focus now is just to get started again and to make a renewed commitment to some of the things I've been referring to.
A lot of our theatres have received some very generous grants, and most of them came very easily and quickly without having to fill in multiple forms or state a case like you do if you want some ACE money normally. And they're all very, very grateful for that, incredibly grateful. And although I haven't discussed it with anybody at all, you could say we're not in the mood to bite the hand that feeds.
I'd started a production with some drama-trained young actors in a year ago last March. So we're sort of 15 months on now. I'm trying to revive that to put that on at Cast in Doncaster, which is an NPO theatre. And some of them have moved on. They're not even in acting anymore. So I'm currently in the middle of trying to recast a couple of the parts. And I can't expect them not to have moved on. Now you multiply my little incident, which is neither here nor there, by all of this across the UK theatre and West End theatre and so on. And there's this great sort of elephant in the room of all the people that were working who aren't. Well, that doesn't impact on most of the LTG theatres in any stark way, and that's a big thing. I mean, I'd be feeling very aggrieved about it. I ought to just add as well that we've always had a good working relationship with one or two professional theatres that we've had dealings with. Well, we like to think we've got good working relationships with all of them. But people like the RSC, for example, now they even at the start of the pandemic, we were keeping in touch with them about what we can do in the future and so on. That, for whatever reason, has all got very quiet. I think they're just coping themselves on getting set up and started again. I've not heard much from them recently. I don't take that amiss. I just assume that they're embroiled in just re-establishing themselves for the future.
What would be the point in moaning about the government or moaning about the 4-week delay? What would we be doing it for? What sort of outcome would we be looking for? And I'm forced to think about the hospitality business, mainly because my ex-husband and my daughter are both, my ex-husband's got a chain of pubs and my daughter manages one of the pubs. And she's been running a COVID-safe pub now for 8 or 9 months or something. And it is squeaky clean in there. I mean, it's cleaner and more sanitary and more safe than a hospital waiting room, I can tell you. It's like going into a prison, going into that pub. And the hospitality industry has been very vocal. You've had the head of Fuller's and the head of restaurant chains all complaining bitterly on TV day after day, week after week, all through lockdown. We've got perfectly safe restaurants, we've got pubs. Why are we singled out for this terrible treatment, etc., etc., etc.? Where has it got them? Oh, that will be nowhere then. Absolutely nowhere. Totally nowhere. They're completely ignored.
I asked theatres whether they'd had to cancel or not. So I'm just collating. Some have gone ahead socially distanced. They generally tend to be the larger theatres. Some theatres had taken the decision not to do anything till September, October. They would normally be closed for the 6 weeks in the summer. And other theatres, like my own, we run year round, and we'd got a summer Panto rehearsing, which was due to open on the 9th of July. What we've done is postponed it till next January, because what we couldn't do was slide productions, because people have sort of planned because we've got 4 more productions before the end of the year. It's not financially viable. I mean, take my theatre, 95 seats. If you've got social distancing, you can get less than 20 people in.
Yeah.
That wouldn't even cover the royalties. A lot of theatres have been doing online, which has kept the creatives going.
But they're not having to deal with the nightmare of professional. That's my phone going in the background. We'll ignore that. The nightmare of professional contracts. Having to rejig constantly professional contracts for actors and designers and set builders and God knows what. There's no wonder the pips are squeaking in professional theatre. I'd be feeling the same way. And another 4-week delay means all those contracts are then theoretically don't become worth the paper that they're written on. And so they have to rejig all the dates again. And then there's problems with actor availability because the actors might be booked onto a TV series or whatever.
I think from the comments we're getting back from not just LTG reps, but from chairmen, they're satisfied with what we've done and been doing and continue to do. And I think they're confident enough in our approach to know that we probably couldn't have done any more.
Yeah.
There comes a time when it's no longer worth lobbying ministers. You've got as far as you could get lobbying. And so there comes a time when you have to just sit back and almost take it on the chin. And I think to a degree, that's where we've got to.
Because we're like a big family, really. I think our member theatres know myself and Joe and Eddie and all our other National Committee people. They know us well enough, and they do, I assure you, to just get on the phone straight away. If they'd have said to us, we want you to make a big fuss about this extra 4 weeks, by God, we'd have heard about it.
The early signs are fantastic. The early signs are they all want to come back. And it's the same with the volunteers, who you could absolutely understand if they said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming and standing by a sanitary station and wearing, and challenging people if they haven't got masks, and that's not what I want to do. No, the volunteers are queuing up to do front of house duties and so on, and you need more than you ever did before. So, it's in some ways it's incredible that they are coming out. I think it just goes to show how, despite takeaway pizzas and beer and Netflix and everything, people want to go out and be entertained. They actually don't want to sit in their front rooms for longer than they feel they want to. They don't want to be told they want to sit in their front rooms. They hate it, actually. They want to get back out into theatres.
I'm also hearing from people who started to go to events that actually they've been amazed at how safe they've felt, having gone in with great trepidation. I know a lot of our theatres are quite small and there are particular challenges, but I mean, I went to a concert I dared to do a concert in London in the middle of May, a socially distanced one, and the concert hall was the safest place I felt. I felt a lot safer there than on the tube and on the train, because it was all beautifully organized and thoroughly enjoyable for all that.
That's great.
So I think people are getting. I think once they've dipped their toe in the water, and so to a certain extent, I think the socially distanced experience is actually more reassuring than I thought it was going to be on a personal level.
That's brilliant.
It was very reassuring.
I think it's safe to say, Paul, that your basic question, I think the real answer to it lies back with the members. If we were to suddenly start making political gestures or statements about what the government is up to, I think our members would be faintly astonished, because it's not what we've set out our store to be. No. It's not classic of us. It's not in our nature, as we are at the moment, to do that. It's in our nature to interpret things for them and to help them, guide them along making best practice decisions, but not to be out there in the public eye making big statements.
And what my previous role had been is not relevant to this conversation with you today, Paul. Clearly, as you know, I've been working as an independent theatre producer in the past few years and continue to do so. And so as such, my perspective is based on where we are currently. I think you've asked 2 or 3 questions there. First of all, you've asked about umbrella bodies. I'm not sure what your definition is of an umbrella body, because there's a number of membership associations operating within amateur theatre, and I would suggest to you to start with that those membership associations or organisations, probably their first and most important focus has to be its members. And so whether it's the one I used to work for or any other, the term umbrella body, I think, is perhaps a bit difficult to unpick unless you actually understand what they're doing, because my take on the what you're calling umbrella bodies is that they tend mainly to be organizations made up of members who provide a range of services to its members. So it's not as though, for example, we have the equivalent of a UK-wide regulatory body for amateur theatre. Maybe there's a bit of a gap there, and maybe the issues around the pandemic have highlighted that, because I suspect if you're talking to any of those membership associations that exist at the moment in amateur theatre, they can probably only give you a perspective based on what their own members are saying to them. That would be my take on it.
The reason I mention umbrella is because when I originally sent some invites out, a NODA spokesperson came back declining the interview, but that's not the point. He said we are an umbrella body, but we're also, more importantly, a membership association, and we are first and foremost answerable to our members. But he did say he was an umbrella body, but so that's the only reason I've kind of borrowed that phrase, so to speak.
Yeah, I think, you know, the difference between those professional bodies you've mentioned in your introduction and amateurs generally is that obviously the professionals have more financial clout. They, I would guess, certainly have more people in post whose roles are there to manage communications and indeed campaigning, which is probably a bit of a gap in the amateur market generally, in that, as you know, there are still thousands of independent amateur theatre groups or societies or clubs, all run by voluntary committees. The membership associations, who you've already mentioned, don't have, in the main, have the kind of infrastructure that would allow them to carry out campaigning. And so I think it's a difficult one in terms of how could you best coordinate a response to the pandemic. I suspect, you know, there's a lot of individual companies, clubs, societies who have had committee meetings during the past year on Zoom, and they've been thinking, how on earth can we survive? Because, as you know, the vast majority are thinking about the next production. Maybe they're thinking about the shows that they would normally have been putting on in 2 or 3 years' time as well. But in terms of planning, it's more often than not the next show. I think there is a real gap, and the pandemic has highlighted that gap, in terms of the need for amateur theatre to have a cohesive campaigning voice, which possibly may not exist at the moment. The difficulty that I would see, and this again is just a personal point of view, is that the pandemic has come out of nowhere. And clearly has had a massive impact on both professional and amateur theatre. No one was expecting it. And in many respects, I would put to you this, that is it reasonable to expect, on the back of the pandemic, is it reasonable to expect the national membership associations, and indeed those thousands of independent groups, companies, societies, to develop a campaigning or communication strategy in response to the pandemic from nowhere? And I say from nowhere with the greatest respect, because if those organizations haven't already got the infrastructure, then they would have to develop one very quickly. And for lots of people, they may not know how to do that. You've talked, for example, about really useful group, equity, etc., etc. These organizations have got, in the main, I would put to you, long established PR communications departments. Amateurs haven't. They may have somebody on a committee who's responsible for marketing. They may well, I'm talking here obviously about individual groups, they may well have somebody who's responsible for fundraising. But the issues around campaigning are actually quite different. And it could well be that what the pandemic has highlighted is the fact that within the amateur sector, there isn't across the board a robust enough structure to support campaigning. And I can only really, I suppose, recount to you something I was involved in my previous role that you've already mentioned. And that was several years ago. I was interviewed on Radio 4, and the interview was carried out by Paddy O'Connell on Broadcasting House. And it was one of these pieces that was very light and there was quite a bit of banter. But at the end of the interview, I was asked on air if there was any one particular point that I wanted to get across. And I said, yes, there was. And I said that point was then, and I think it's just as relevant now, to try and get local authorities up and down the country to recognise the importance of amateur theatre, and to try and get the message across that throughout the country, amateur theatre is often the glue within local culture, local, not just theatre, but music, stand-up, classical music, you name it. And as I say, this interview was several years ago now. That's when we wrapped up that interview on Radio 4. And I think to an extent, what I was trying to get across was the fact that local authorities, let alone national government, probably don't pay enough regard or respect to the amateur theatre world. And so is there a need for a more dedicated focus? Then yes, there is. But where that comes from, it's not for me to say, Paul. I think it would require quite a coordinated approach, not just between the membership associations, but also, even within areas or regions where we've got lots of individual companies. If you asked any one of those membership associations, what are your members asking you for? I guess they're going to say, well, it's the services that they're providing us with, us being individual groups or clubs or societies up and down the country, or if not direct services, indirect services we can access that enables those groups to continue. Does it include a campaigning role? I don't know. It may well not do. If you've been on the committee of a group, would you encourage the rest of your committee and indeed your own members, to sign up to an association purely because it has an active campaigning arm? You may well, on the back of the pandemic, think it's very worthwhile. Pre-pandemic, would you have thought it was worthwhile? Would you say to your committee, we should devote an element of our funds every year to pay a subscription to belong to this amateur theatre campaigning body? You may well not have done. Maybe if you were to say now, do you think it's worthwhile? A lot of people would probably say yes, because I think there is still a lack of awareness at local and national government level of the importance of the amateur sector. And I think that's something that you can't just look at in isolation on the back of the pandemic. It's a much wider problem than the pandemic. The pandemic, though, has highlighted it. And if the issue is, does amateur theatre have a campaigning voice? Possibly not a coordinated one. Should it have had one? Probably yes. Does it need one now on the back of the pandemic? Most certainly yes. Going forward, we're still very much in the dark in terms of the future of theatre, especially amateur theatre. Again, I can recall in my previous role, I attended a meeting of members, committee members from different groups in one particular part of the country on one occasion, and we were talking about marketing and promotion. And I actually put to those present, I put to the audience, how feasible would it be for them in that particular part of the country to work more collaboratively when promoting each other's shows? Do you know what the response was? The response was, well, why would we want to promote their shows? That may have been just on that particular occasion with those present at that particular time. But what I believe you're highlighting is the fact that within the amateur theatre world, there needs to be great, maybe greater, but certainly great collaboration, cooperation to work together at every level to get across the message that amateur theatre is really important. And whoever it is that does that job, my view is they need to take on the role of bringing people together to be able to speak with one voice. And maybe that's what you were highlighting, the fact that at the moment, the voice A isn't loud enough, and B isn't coordinated enough. You're asking people to take a leap of faith that actually it's safe. And so I think fundamentally, my view is that until the pandemic is no longer a worldwide problem, I think we will still be living with restrictions. That whatever those restrictions are, it's going to make it difficult to get audiences into theatre. It's certainly just as challenging to talk about rehearsals. And, in terms of the threat of, and it is a threat of COVID-19, how do you protect yourselves as a member belonging to an amateur theatre group? How do you protect your audiences? How do you encourage them to come back into a theatre and tell them it's safe? And I think that's probably the single biggest challenge. Yeah. We then get on to the more creative challenges of, can we support new work? Does it have to be the old favourites? But frankly, those become almost secondary considerations to the primary focus, which has to be the safety of audiences and company members. And again, because you've seen so many theatres, just as I have, there's lots of physical buildings now where you would think, I'm not sure about this. The ventilation isn't very good. The internal fabric of the building isn't very good. And so, again, it adds to any concerns that some people might have. The Panto season, as you say, will soon be upon us. My view is that, first and foremost, if you're producing a Panto, the message you have to get across is not just the words, we're safe, but actually be able to prove it. And how can you prove it? I mean, just to change the subject ever so slightly, but you'll see where I'm coming from. Now, at the moment, the Euros are being played, football Euros are being played across Europe. We've had a case this week where a member of the Scotland squad proved positive for COVID, and then within hours, people he'd been in close contact with are self-isolating. Yet, I think the way the Euros are being played highlights similar challenges to theatres. There was a match played in Budapest last week where 60,000 people attended.
That's right. I saw it. Yeah.
Just think about that. And yet there are other matches being played where capacity is being restricted to just a handful, a few thousand. Now, where's the logic in all of that? And then, of course, you do have the issues around the individual squads representing each country. Is it easy to manage? Of course it's not. Is it causing problems? Yes, it is. And that's in an environment where the argument, I guess, would be, well, of course, most of these stadiums are outdoors, and so people are going to be safer, etc., etc. But if you just think about the problems that they've been facing there and translate them into amateur theatre and the buildings that theatre is taking place in, that's why I think that the problems of safety are going to be with us for some considerable time to come. And there isn't a magic formula there at the moment. My particular project, which has been on the go since 2015, is a new rock musical called Twist and Turn, which was showcased at the Other Palace in their studio theatre in October 2018, and led to a reevaluation of the progress that had been made to that point during 2019. And based on the feedback from audiences at the showcase, which amounted to some 200 or so feedback cards, which were really helpful. So if you were in the audience then, thank you very much, because that feedback was fantastic. It showed where there were holes in the book, in the story. It also highlighted which songs went down particularly well, those that didn't. And so I, together with a couple of collaborators, then embarked on rewriting the book, as well as a whole batch of new songs, with the intention of producing another version on stage. Well, of course, 2020 came along and put paid to that idea. And so I then moved in a completely different direction and started to think outside the box. The result being that for the past year, we've now got a whole batch of new songs that have all dropped on iTunes, and some of them are enjoying a lot of radio play. One in particular has been streamed over 100,000 times on Spotify. And so at the moment, the plan is to continue to raise awareness of the music, and at the same time to bring out a graphic novel of Twist and Turn, which will be published in October 2021. And that, I think, is quite different. It tells the story of the show, but in the form of a graphic novel. And when that is launched later this year, you'll be able to get it either online with a digital download of all the music, or if you're old-fashioned like me, you might want a print copy of Twist and Turn, the graphic novel, together with the music on either vinyl or CD. And that thinking outside the box was very much driven by what happened when the pandemic hit us, because it said to me that the prospect of producing another stage version was something that really was very hard to foresee. And so it meant thinking differently, and that's what I've been trying to do. And I have to pay tribute to my collaborators in the past year, mainly those involved in recording songs on a socially distanced basis. You know, if I may just give one example, we've got a song from the show called The Perfect Glove, where I demoed it in Peterborough. It was produced by a guy called Sandy Jones I've worked with a long time in Motherwell. And the vocalist is based in Queensland, Australia. And when you hear it, it's a very high quality, professionally produced song. As I say, it's been getting a lot of radio play around the world. And it just shows what you can achieve using the technology of today. And I suppose my final thought would be, it's only by thinking outside the box and using the technology available that I've been able to keep the development of Twist and Turn underway, because the traditional approach of, well, let's rewrite the book, write some new music, put on another production, that's obviously not been an option available.
Too much. She drives me